invocation of the Lord here. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Prajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Prajajanaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Prajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Prajajanaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva. Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol. So we'll do the invocation prayers. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurun Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padang Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namoshtute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. So I'd like to express my gratitude to Srila Prabhupada for the great gifts that he's given us, this great knowledge that he's given us, this great wisdom that he's given us. Yesterday the devotee mentioned the word kritagya, which means gratitude, and that really struck me. I didn't know the Sanskrit word for gratitude before. Kritagya. Krita means what has been given, and knowledge, kritagya, what knowledge has been given. So the great gift that Srila Prabhupada has given us, we're very grateful, because it's changed the very trajectory of our lives, giving us a different way of looking at life altogether. Had we not met Srila Prabhupada, surely we'd be wandering through the endless cycle of birth and death, and making so many wandering in the modes of material nature, the mode of passion, the mode of ignorance. But by his grace, he's given us a way to rise us up to live our life in the mode of goodness, which is very much easier then to tap into the spiritual wisdom that we need, and that Prabhupada has come to teach us. So every Monday here at Radhadesh, they have a very nice program where they talk about Srila Prabhupada, they remember Srila Prabhupada, and they read some of the biographies that have been written about Srila Prabhupada. So what we're reading at the moment is from Hari Sori Prabhu, and he was acting as Srila Prabhupada's servant for quite a long time. So that means he was traveling with Srila Prabhupada, he was helping him out, he was assisting him in so many ways. And while he was doing that, he also wrote diaries. So his book here is called A Transcendental Diary, Travels with His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And it so happens that he was Prabhupada's assistant, Prabhupada's servant, when I was at the Bhaktivedanta Manor. So as I talked about last week, I had the great fortune of meeting Srila Prabhupada in the sense that I was a new devotee living at the temple in Bhaktivedanta Manor in London, a beautiful ashram that had been donated by George Harrison of the Beatles, and there was maybe 30 or 40 devotees living there at that time when I joined, and Krishna consciousness was really buzzing in England. There was a lot of Western boys and girls that had joined. When I say boys and girls, could literally, mostly were like in the late teens or early 20s. So we were very young and naive, but somehow or other we'd come across the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, we'd come across the books of Srila Prabhupada, and it had, many of us had come forward and wanted to serve him in so many ways. So I'd joined at the Bhaktivedanta Manor, and I'd been living there just for a few months when we got the message that Srila Prabhupada was coming. He'd been traveling. He was continuously traveling around the world whenever he could. This time he was in his late 70s, coming up to 80 years old. So most of us, when we get into our older years, we're thinking, oh, how can I slow down, make a comfortable situation, and just live a peaceful life? But Srila Prabhupada had taken on his mission, taken on his message, wanted to spread his message when he was at the ripe old age of 69, going on to 70. And since then, he'd established Krishna consciousness, first of all in America, and then he traveled to many parts of the world, or sent his representatives. In the case of England, he'd sent 6 devotees, or 6.5, they say, 6 devotees from America to England to establish Krishna consciousness there. So they hadn't been devotees for very long, only a very short time they'd lived in the temple. But because of the potency of Srila Prabhupada, because of their love for Srila Prabhupada, they just wanted to help him and serve him. And when I say he'd come to spread his mission, of course it wasn't his, it was his own spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who was coming in the line of Guru Parampara. That's very important. So he's coming in the line of Guru Parampara and the disciplic succession. And in the disciplic succession that we can trace back to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When we said our prayers at the beginning, Om Agyana Timanandas, we're calling on that wonderful Guru Parampara to empower us, to bless us, to give us their mercy, so that we can also be part of that great mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We understand that Lord Krishna came into this world 5,000 years ago, just over 5,000, and he came to show his wonderful pastimes. Just over 500 years ago, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, and he came, we understand that he is Krishna himself. Either he comes himself or he sends his different representatives in the world. And why did he come here, and why does Krishna come here, and why do the different incarnations come? All to try and remind us living entities that why are you wandering in this cycle of birth and death, this material realm, identifying with various different types of bodies, but actually you belong in the spiritual realm, which is eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. So we're coming in that line of disciplic succession. And Srila Prabhupada is coming to the West on the message of his spiritual master, who told him on their very first meeting when he was a young man, a young householder, he said to him, you're an educated young man. You teach these message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu around the world. I want you to do that. So he gave him his mission early on. Srila Prabhupada wasn't able to fulfill that mission at that time. He was a young man, he had a family, he was working, he had a business, but he always kept that message of his spiritual master deep in his heart. And when the time was right, and that was when he was 69 years old, he managed to get a steamship, he get a free ticket on a boat to come to New York. But he wasn't coming there for sightseeing, he wasn't coming there for sense gratification, to enjoy his senses. He was coming to spread the message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as his Guru Maharaj had told him. So this is part of his travel. So we should understand that by this time he came to London. Okay, let me calm down. So Srila Prabhupada had been traveling around the world. Everywhere he's going, he'd established temples, he'd established farming communities, restaurants, preaching centers. All the while he was translating these books from Sanskrit into English, making it readily accessible for people to understand in the West. So while he's traveling, he's also translating and getting his disciples to help print the books. But he's coming to try and inspire and enliven the devotees. So we got the message that he's coming to London. At that time, Hari Suri, he's the assistant, and he kept this diary. So I've been reading this week about the time when he came here. So as a new devotee, I had a very different conception of Srila Prabhupada's visit to the conception that Hari Suri Prabhu had. I was, like I say, I was a new devotee. I was learning this philosophy. I'd come to Bhaktivedanta Manor because I wanted to find out more. I'd read some of Prabhupada's books and I'd been very impressed by that. And I'd come to the temple to live, to find out more. And here I was, very fortunate that Srila Prabhupada was coming through. He was coming to visit. So everyone was very excited. Everyone was rushing around, cleaning the place, making it spotless, making everything just so. Somebody asked me yesterday, was Srila Prabhupada very strict? He didn't come over as strict in his manner, but he had very strong principles and he knew how things should be. So we wanted to make everything just right for him. So he'd come from New York. Now, if any of you have travelled from New York or maybe gone to India, come back, we're obviously going to suffer with quite a lot of jet lag, you know. We feel very exhausted for many days. But Srila Prabhupada just seemed to carry on, and the devotees who have travelled with him, they said that sometimes they didn't stay with Prabhupada too long as his assistants because they couldn't keep up with his schedule. Even though they were young, 20s, maybe 30s, Srila Prabhupada he had a lot of vigour. And certainly for myself, when I first saw Srila Prabhupada, he appeared very effulgent, very powerful. He was only quite small in stature. He wasn't very tall, but he had a great presence around him. And that presence is there because of Srila Prabhupada's direct connection with Krishna. Very, very strong connection with Krishna. Not only connection with Krishna, but also the message of his spiritual master. So I first saw Srila Prabhupada when he came at the airport, and my perception was, wow, this wonderful personality. And he sort of came gliding through the arrivals, and we all bowed down. We'd been chanting Hare Krishna. You've seen the Hare Krishnas on the street, you know, like crazy people sometimes. So we were there at the airport, you know, dancing and singing. And then when we saw Srila Prabhupada, a great roar went up. And we all sort of bowed down on the floor, paid our obeisances, and then we were watching as Jaitirtha Prabhu. He was the president of London Temple. Him and the senior devotees, they went forward and presented a garland to Srila Prabhupada, which he graciously accepted. And then he kind of swept by and he went off. So my perception of Prabhupada was this golden, effulgent personality, very aristocratic in his manner, but there was a loving energy that came from him, and he seemed to, Hare Krishna, he glanced around and he kind of took everybody in on his thing. But reading this book, this diary of Harisori, about the week that Srila Prabhupada came, it actually turned out that Prabhupada was actually really quite ill when he'd been travelling. He'd had a heavy cold, possibly a fever, but he was coughing a lot. And even on the flight down, he'd had to lie down on there and take rest. But when he came out at the airport, he didn't appear like a sick elderly gentleman at all. He was very majestic, very wonderful to be in his presence. So, from this biography, I'm going to read little bits and then I'll speak little bits. Let's see, where did we start? Bear with me. So I'll read a little bit from here. Chapter 4, London. So like I say, he actually stayed 1 week in England. Just keep an eye on the time, got plenty of time yet. So this was July the 21st, 1976. The overnight flight to London was extremely difficult for Srila Prabhupada. Racked by a heavy cold, Prabhupada spent practically the whole flight lying down, coughing up large amounts of mucus every few minutes. In fact, he hardly moved at all during the 6.5-hour flight. In the morning, as arrival into London neared, the airline served breakfast. Prabhupada tried to eat a little fruit, but he found it very difficult. He was feeling so ill that he called for Guru Das Maharaj, asking him to arrange a wheelchair for his arrival. So he's feeling very weak. And so then the plane arrives. I'm not going to read all the detail because there's too much. So the plane arrived, basically, and Prabhupada came down the steps. And while he was waiting for them to bring a wheelchair, it seemed to take ages, Prabhupada just patiently walked on. And he walked through, and then came through to the passport area and all that. And then he came through to where we saw him. So like I say, he did not appear at all like a sick elderly person that had just not been eating well, feeling quite ill, quite sick. So he's just an amazing personality. Then in this book, Harisori Prabhu, he mentions that Prabhupada went straight to his rooms and just rested there. But he actually went into his, in the Bhaktivedanta Manor, and even today you can go and visit there, there's Prabhupada's quarters, as we call it. So they have a bedroom for Srila Prabhupada, they have a bathroom for him, and also they have a lounge, an area. So Srila Prabhupada had come back from the airport, had to climb the stairs at the Bhaktivedanta Manor. Again, the devotees wanted to get a chair and carry him up the stairs because Srila Prabhupada was feeling quite weak. But they took it too long to get it together, so Prabhupada ended up walking up the stairs. And he went into his rooms and sat down on a low vyasasan, a low chair like that, with a little table in front, and then he started to give his welcome address. So according to Harisori, he went straight to his rooms and rested. But my memory is that he actually sat and gave an address. And as I was at the airport, we rushed back in our van and we arrived back a little bit later. Everybody had crushed into the room because devotees had come from all over Europe. Not only our London devotees, about 30, 40, 50 of us, from the temple in Soho Street, Berry Place, devotees had come from there, but also all over Europe, devotees had crowded in because they wanted to take this opportunity to see Srila Prabhupada. So we arrived a bit late, my group of ladies, we arrived a bit late. We sat right at the back of the room. So I remember very vividly that first talk that Srila Prabhupada gave, and being in his presence, because although I'd read his books and been very enamored by the teachings and convinced that this is my spiritual master, because I had been seeking spiritual knowledge, and I'd looked here and looked there, looked at different religions, looked at different philosophies, but nothing had really gelled. So, but when I read Srila Prabhupada's books for the first time, it really changed my perception on life. So I arrived in there and in the room and sat down and was listening to Srila Prabhupada and watching. It was like all eyes were focused on Prabhupada, all attention. It was like you almost felt like you couldn't breathe. You didn't want to miss a second of being in his association. And Prabhupada very graciously spoke the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. He thanked all the devotees for their service, for their dedication, and gave his welcome address to everyone. So I remember that quite very strongly because it was the first time I met my spiritual master. So he sat there for a while and spoke to us, and then he went off to his rooms. But according to the diary of Harisuri, the rest of the day he was so exhausted that he just kind of rested. So like I say, my impression was totally different. I didn't see this Srila Prabhupada like that. So when he was speaking to us, because he's so much in touch with Krishna, he's so much connected, that it was like this spiritual energy was so much more powerful than any of the material conditions. Anyway, maybe didn't put that over so well, but I know what I mean. Let's have a look. So the next day, I did earmark a few things to read. Yeah. So the next day, so after his rest, Prabhupada seemed to have recovered a little the next morning. Although he decided to greet the deities, it was a great strain on him. So again, we were there when Srila Prabhupada came down and came in front of the deities, bowed down, and he looked at the deities with such love and devotion. You know, it was like he was looking very directly at Krishna, and it was like he was having a conversation with Krishna. So we were again crowded in the temple room, and we weren't looking at the deities at that time. We were looking at Prabhupada, looking at the deities, and we were getting so much energy from that, you know. So he came down, although it's, again, Harisuri is saying, although he decided to greet the deities, he came down for like, when we sing the Govindam, Adipurusham, Tamaham Bhajami. We were singing that yesterday, weren't we? It's reported Srila Prabhupada had heart palpitations coming back up the staircase. He was still very weak. Then he attempted to eat some breakfast, but he only had a couple of spoonfuls of fruit. Anyway. So then Prabhupada had quite a restful morning. After resting all afternoon, Srila Prabhupada called in Harikesh Maharaj and Jaitirtha Prabhu. So Harikesh Maharaj had been in charge of a lot of the European temples, and Jaitirtha was in charge, like the temple president for England, for Bhaktivedanta Manor. Oh, saying here that Jaitirtha had just taken over as a GBC in London since April. Okay. So he preached and chatted to them for a couple of hours, which was very encouraging to everyone. Though he was very ill, Srila Prabhupada, he could not resist talking about Lord Krishna and preaching to us. Somehow, even in failing health, he still finds the strength for Krishna Katha. So that's enlivened Srila Prabhupada when he's talking to the devotees, when he's explaining about the philosophy, when he's telling the stories of Krishna, or when he's hearing about how the preaching work is going on. This would give Srila Prabhupada a lot of pleasure and a lot of energy. So then the next day, July the 23rd, Prabhupada called his servants in early this morning to around 5 a.m. He then spoke to them till about 7 a.m. Then, as he was feeling enlivened, he again went down to greet the deities. The devotees were extremely happy to see him, and he was very happy to see them. There was, however, one disturbance. As Srila Prabhupada offered his prostrated obeisances, that means he bowed down like you see the men bowing down, like a full dandavats. Yeah. So Srila Prabhupada, even though he's like 79, 80-year-old, not in good health, still he comes before the deities and pays his full dandavats. So as Prabhupada offered his prostrated obeisances to the beautiful forms of Sri Sri Radha Gokulananda, one devotee came forward and touched his feet. Prabhupada was annoyed. When he got up, he stopped his darshan and turned to see who had done it. He didn't like that it was done in front of the deities, and he warned that it should not happen again. So there's a little lesson there. So, Prabhupada really didn't like people touching his feet, because it said that if they touch his feet, then if you touch someone's feet, then you take their karma. You take responsibility for them. But especially, people always wanted to touch Srila Prabhupada's feet. And the devotees were always trying to protect Prabhupada so they couldn't. Although he did allow some people to. But especially, why was Srila Prabhupada annoyed? Because they were doing it in the temple room, in front of the deities. So he didn't like that they were trying to honor him like that, in such a way in front of the deities. So Srila Prabhupada stayed to give class. And it astonished me how he was able to summon the necessary strength, for he had not eaten hardly a bite of food for 2 days. He continued with the Chaitanya Charitamrita verse that he'd been speaking on in New York. And then Harisori goes on to explain a little bit what he was talking about. So he carried on that theme that he'd had in New York. So Srila Prabhupada would read he'd do the translations, but he'd also read his books, because he said that I'm not writing these books because he's so connected with Krishna. He said, Krishna is working through me, is empowering me to write these books. So this is Krishna writing, and I'm just being an instrument in his hands. So in this lecture he talked about life on other planets and the logic of Mother Nature, like Mother Nature and her children, the living beings, as proof that there is a Supreme Father. So he said, Mother Earth, Mother Nature is there, and her children, the living beings, whether it be human beings or trees or plants or animals, they're all the children of Mother Nature. And who is the Father? As we understand from Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, I am the seed-giving Father. So he was talking on that kind of theme to all the devotees. And I was very fortunate to be there in that lecture. And as I say, all eyes were on Prabhupada. It's like you could hear a pin drop. Nobody was like doing anything else except focusing on Srila Prabhupada, wanting to get as much as we can. And it's said in our scriptures that even a moment's association with a pure devotee is very powerful. So, and Srila Prabhupada understood the importance of traveling around and giving that association, encouragement to all the devotees. Okay, just read a little bit more. So then he talks about the lecture that he gave. So Bhagavan Prabhu, he was preaching very much in the West. He'd been attempting to arrange a meeting with the Pope. And Prabhupada was scheduled to visit the new centre in Rome with a meeting with the Pontiff as part of his agenda. But after some discussion, Prabhupada decided it would be too much endeavour. He questioned the practical advantage of meeting the Pope, saying that simply meeting big men and showing no profit was the business of his godbrothers, like Bon and Tirtha Maharaj. He noted that they always advertised that they met this one or that one, but no actual preaching about Krishna consciousness was really accomplished. To illustrate the point, he told the story of the tiger and the crane. There was once a tiger who, after eating a small animal, got a bone stuck in his throat. Not being able to dislodge it, he called to the crane, "Oh, my dear friend, you have a nice long beak. Kindly put your head in my mouth and remove this bone, otherwise I shall die. Do not be afraid, I shall not harm you, and I shall be very pleased with you." Naturally, the crane was very wary, for after all, the tiger's business was to eat other animals like himself. But he thought that since this tiger is so powerful, if he actually removed the bone, certainly he'll give me some benediction. So the crane agreed and stuck his head in the tiger's mouth. The crane then successfully removed the bone. Relieved, the tiger was about to go when he saw the crane still standing before him expectantly. "Well, what is this?" the tiger growled. "My dear sir," said the crane, "I've done what you requested, and I removed the bone. Kindly give me some benediction." "What?" roared the tiger. "I've allowed you to put your head in my mouth without biting it off, and you want something more?" Prabhupada then explained that although his godbrothers, or whatever, go to call on so-called leaders of society, expecting something from them, the leader is thinking, "Well, I've given you some of my time, and you still want something more?" So they feel that just by giving audience, they're doing a great thing. They're not actually listening to the message that we want to give or what Prabhupada wants to give. He said that the conclusion was that there is no profit to be had in such meetings as this. Therefore, he decided to tell Bhagavan not to bother arranging a meeting with the Pope. He didn't feel it was going to produce any good results, so he didn't. But many times certainly when he was visiting London, not so much on this trip, he was only here for a month, but I heard from before when Srila Prabhupada stayed longer and he was in better health, he was always wanting to meet different leaders of society, different prominent people, because there's that teaching in the Bhagavad Gita, whatever a great man does, common men follow in their footsteps. Whatever standards they set, all the world pursues. So he was always trying to talk to people who had an influence on others, if he felt that they could take something on board that some of the teachings that Srila Prabhupada was given, and be able to share that with others. So he did like to meet a lot of people from all different walks of life. Prabhupada was always very gracious when he spoke to them, and he would talk, like, I remember one story they told about, there was a car racing driver, I forget his name now, anyway, it slips my memory. So he was quite a famous racing driver. They got him to come and see Srila Prabhupada. So first of all, Srila Prabhupada talked about cars and racing, something to connect a rapport with this person. But then, of course, he always bring the philosophy around, explaining that you're not the body, you're eternal spiritual being, we're eternal souls conditioned by the outward body. So he'd always turn it round and bring the philosophy out. First of all, building a rapport with the person, and then very expertly explaining the philosophy that he'd come to teach the Western world. Okay, let's have a look here. I'll just take some snippets from here. Despite his own illness, Prabhupada remains as full of regard of others as ever for others. He was very caring, Srila Prabhupada. So when Mukunda came to his room, Mukunda was one of the early devotees. There were 6 devotees that came from America to England. Mukunda came with his wife Janaki, not this Janaki, the original Janaki, and Shama Sundar, who's also written biographies, and Yamuna Devi, and Malati and Shama Sundar. They were the first ones again. And Malati and Shama Sundar, they'd got a small baby. So, how dedicated they were to serve Prabhupada. They even got a little baby, but still they wanted to do something wonderful for Prabhupada. And they were the first ones that came to the West. So Mukunda, he was travelling with Srila Prabhupada at this time. When Mukunda came into his room, looking rather pale and gaunt, Prabhupada became very concerned, and he wanted assurance that his disciple was all right. He asked if he was keeping his health and if he needed anything. So despite his own ill health, he was always concerned about the devotees. Are you eating properly? Are you getting enough rest? How are you? So although he was, like somebody asked, was Prabhupada strict? Although he had strict standards, as we see from our deity worship, very strict standards, and Prabhupada was very concerned about punctuality and cleanliness. But that was his role as an acharya, as a teacher, trying to teach us. But on a personal level, he was always very kind and very loving and very caring to the devotees. As we see just from that small example, one of his devotees hadn't been well. Prabhupada noticed that. He often gave advice as well, because before he became the founder Acharya of ISKCON, he was a pharmacist, and he knew about different medicines and different things, especially in Ayurvedic medicine. He was very knowledgeable in that. So he'd often give advice: you should take this, try this medicine, do like this, do like that, eat this diet, eat that. So Prabhupada was very knowledgeable about so many wonderful things here. Okay, Hare Krishna. How are we doing? Oh, marching on. Right. Okay, I'll talk about one day. So from the week, so we understand Prabhupada's not very strong, but then on the Sunday, where was that? I'll read a few snippets about the Sunday. So Srila Prabhupada, bear with me, Hare Krishna. Okay, I'll read a bit from here. Today was Sunday, and Prabhupada decided to go ahead with plans to visit the temple in London. Although he is still very weak, and his still respiratory tracts are congested, he said he just wanted to have Darshan of Sri Sri Radha Londoneshwara. They were the first large deities he'd installed in the West, and Srila Prabhupada had a very special affection for them. So they took him to, this was at Bury Place, which was Bloomsbury Square near the London Museum. And that was the first city centre temple that they'd had in London. There's a lot of stories about that. And if you wanted to find out more about that, Shama Sundar Prabhu has written a very nice story in his Chasing Rhinos about how he actually helped construct the temple and prepare it ready for the deities. But that's another big long story. So before they actually went to see the temple in Bury Place, Jaitirtha Prabhu, the newly appointed GBC, took Srila Prabhupada to see the outside of a building on Soho Street, just off the famous Oxford Street. So that is the temple, this is where the temple is now. They moved from Bury Place and they moved into this temple in Soho Street, which is a very successful temple. Deities also moved there. It was formerly a pub, but was now vacant Jaitirtha explained that if the devotees brought it, they would completely renovate it, turn it into a restaurant downstairs and a temple upstairs. The building itself wasn't particularly impressive. Its size could only be described as adequate, but the location was amazing. Location was very difficult to beat, and this is what Prabhupada appreciated most. When Jaitirtha assured Prabhupada they would be able to buy it without making a BBT loan, he gave his approval for the purchase. So it's really nice to think that that temple is going on now, and that Srila Prabhupada saw that building before it was renovated and sort of gave his blessings that this is a good place. It is very well situated, and if ever you go to London, Oxford Street, I think Tottenham Court Road is the nearest station to get there. It's just on Soho Street. Okay, we hear the word Soho, we think of the seedy parts of London, the back streets, but this is Soho Street. It's not in that kind of area. It's just literally off Oxford Street. And they have a beautiful restaurant downstairs, first floor. They have a small temple, smaller than this, but they have Radha Londonishwara, Jagannath Baladev, Subhadra Devaki, larger than these deities, and that go out on the Rath Yatra. And they're worshipped very gorgeously there by a very dedicated, devoted bunch of devotees. The pujaris are very dedicated to the deities. As I see here, also in Radhadesh, there's a lot of dedication. Deities are very gorgeously worshipped. I'm sure Srila Prabhupada is very pleased to see the wonderful outfits and the beautiful garlands and the attention to detail. Srila Prabhupada would always, his attention to detail was there. He would notice things that weren't quite right.
Remember when he was leaning forward and he said, there is a tiny little bit of tila in Krishna's eyes.
Yes, that's wonderful. I don't know if you heard that. Srila Prabhupada, when he was viewing the deities at some temple, there's a famous story that, like I say, his attention to... So he'd look at the deities and he would take it all in, and he saw a tiny little bit of tilak by Krishna's eye, and he told the devotees about it, you know. They're not strict, but very particular and very careful to give us the proper message. Coming in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. After Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, 6 Goswamis. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, especially Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami, he'd given them very intense dialogue and discussion, and they took on his message, and they went on to write so many books, and many of those books Srila Prabhupada translated and made available. So we're following in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Hare Krishna. So, where did I get to? Oh yeah, so this Sunday, Prabhupada had gone there to visit Berry Place. He'd also seen Soho Street. So of course, so many devotees would have been there. So naturally, Srila Prabhupada gives a talk, encourages the devotees, and generally gives a darshan and talk for them. Srila Prabhupada said he was very pleased to see how well the devotees were looking after the deities. After offering his dandavats and taking a little charanamrita, he sat on his vyasasana in front of their lordship and gave a talk encouraging the devotees to continue their service without being disturbed. So he gave a talk there. Go on executing your routine work, he said. I'm very glad to see that you are taking care of the deities very nicely. Whenever I come, I see. This is very encouraging. So God consciousness means you have to face difficulty, but you should not be discouraged. You must go on with your business, then success is sure. When there is difficulty, a devotee thinks, It is my good fortune that Krishna has given some difficulty to counteract my previous bad action. So in this way, if we live, then mukti pade sadhyabak. If one is not opposed by all these difficulties, and with determination he goes forward, then for him, going back to home, back to Godhead, is guaranteed. Imagine Prabhupada sitting there and saying this to the devotees. Don't matter what difficulties you go through, just keep on. And that is definitely the message that I want to say as well, as an older person in years, older devotee in years. Just do not give up your Krishna consciousness. So many things happen in life, the highs, the lows, we get pulled in different directions. But Srila Prabhupada is saying to us, no matter what difficulties are there, do not give up this chanting of Hare Krishna, this association of devotees. Try your best. And you will be guaranteed to go back home, back to Godhead. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So basically, we're running out of time now. That went quick all of a sudden. So what I wanted to say was, on this day, so he went to the temple in city centre London. That's about a 45 minutes, hour drive. Climbed up the stairs, because many stairs, give talk to the devotees. After that, he went to a devotee's home. At the time, there was many Western devotees there, not many Asian devotees, but there was one Indian family who we talked about the other day, last week when I was talking, Radhadesh Vishnu, and Srila Prabhupada went to his home, and this devotee was initiated by Prabhupada, and he had made a temple in his home. And Srila Prabhupada again, they'd invited many people, Srila Prabhupada again gave a lecture, gave a talk. He went upstairs afterwards. They fed him some nice prasadam. He took a small rest. By that time, more people had gathered. So Prabhupada again went down, gave another talk. So already he's given 3 talks on this Sunday. You can't stop him. He always wants to share this wisdom and this knowledge with everybody. So after that, he went back to the manor. So moving on, because he went back to the manor. He went up to his rooms and he rested for a while when he got back there. But again, more people had arrived and they wanted to have darshan, they wanted to see Prabhupada and hear him. So again, this time he spoke in his rooms, sat there, and he gave so 4 different lectures he gave on that one Sunday, always feeling he wanted to share the message that he'd come to give. And this, when Prabhupada was preaching and talking, then he'd become energized. But afterwards, then he would be quite weak and he'd have to lie down and rest. So this was the week that Srila Prabhupada came to England, when I happened to be there as a new devotee, a bit like you, I think, sitting there, very eager, very enthusiastic, and eager to hear what the message Srila Prabhupada is given. So each one of us is very fortunate to come here. Prabhupada established this beautiful Radhadesh temple here, and the devotees, very mature devotees here, are carrying on the message, nicely worshipping Srila Prabhupada every day. I can feel the devotion when we come to Mangalati. You can feel the devotion of the devotees, their eagerness to serve. And it's also a very nice place in the sense that many guests come, many visitors come. It's in a beautiful part of the country, beautiful part of Belgium. So it attracts many people to the area who then come here. We went to Dubuis. Yes, the other day we went to Dubuis, and there were so many tourists there. But when they come here to this area, maybe some of them will want to come and visit Radhadesh. So this is a great opportunity, and they do beautiful tours here, and they show the history of Radhadesh, also the history of the Hare Krishna movement, and they bring the guests into the temple room, take a little prasadam. So it's a very, very good, this is the flagship of Belgium, really. And yesterday, run out of time now, yesterday we went on a very nice program with Yadurani, small program in somebody's house in Luxembourg. So if this is the central base here, this is the headquarters for this area, but if we can help to encourage devotees to form little groups outside, I'm sure that's going on. Little groups of devotees get together, chant Hare Krishna, read Bhagavad Gita, study this philosophy. So little pockets all over the country, all over the Benelux area. May Srila Prabhupada bless the devotees that they'll be able to carry on this wonderful movement. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Thank you for your time and patience. Forgive me for my mistakes and everything. I didn't leave any time for any questions, but you can always approach me afterwards and I'll be happy to speak. So thank you. Leela's son and daughter, it's wonderful to have you here as well. Feel that you've got a very special mother.
Oh, yes.
Hare Krishna. Hare Bol. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.